It is currently 9:30 in the morning on May 28th, and I had a full-blown album review for Avow ready to be online within the hour. But then, because Portal apparently hate me and want me to suffer in some kind of existential nightmare for my entire weekend, dropped another album out of the fucking blue, and it's even more terrifying, if not at the very least just as terrifying as the aforementioned Avow. So instead of doing two album reviews or crudely pasting another brief review onto the end of the previously recorded one for Avow, we're hitting two rotting, diseased birds with one fucking stone right here, right now. Avow and Hagbulbia are the 6th and 7th studio albums, respectively, from Australian extreme metal crew Portal, who over the course of the past 2 decades have been responsible for some of the most nightmarish and disgusting cavernous and atmospheric death metal one could possibly conjure without literally opening a portal to hell. Their music is just so consistently dark and chaotic and evil and extremely immersive, filled to the brim with menacing vocals, disgusting, horrifying, nightmare-inducing soundscapes, wild, muddy, distorted guitars and rhythms and passages. Even as the band was refining their craft and getting more and more technical on records like Vexavoid and especially Ion, they remained every bit as genuinely horrifying. All leading one Adrian Begrand from Pop Matters to write, "Death metal always pretends to be scary, but it's all rather harmless. That said, however, I make no mistake in saying that the death metal peddled by Australia's Portal is truly friggin' terrifying." And that now brings us to the 1-2 hit whammy combo of Avow and Hagbulbia, the former of which we've known about for months, and upon its sudden release late Thursday night has received near universal acclaim from the likes of Blabbermouth, Heaviest of Art, Exclaim Music, and virtually everyone who is paying attention to this band, while the latter of which came out of fucking nowhere earlier this very morning, emerging like some kind of real-life M. Night Shyamalan-style plot twist. And through both of these albums together, I think we're seeing Portal at their most miserable point yet. At their bleakest, at their darkest, at their most genuinely fucked up and psychotic. To the point where if I knew Portal personally, I would really encourage them to go see a fucking therapist. Now, since we are talking about two albums, and Avow is probably going to be the main draw out of the two, let's focus primarily on this album first. In retrospect, it's maybe a blessing in disguise that my original album review for Avow will now never see the light of day, because initially, I wasn't really a huge fan of this record. A lot of it, to me, felt like darkness for the sake of darkness. I felt that the record was bloated, I felt that it was very repetitive, and just didn't really offer much in terms of actual substance and soul. Now, to be honest, before we go any further, I should note that I still do agree with many of these points, but following another deep and intense playthrough of this record, I must now concede that despite all of that, this is still a pretty ghoulish and nightmare-inducing display of noise-caked cavernous death metal. The opening track, Catafalque, is a very harsh and cold flurry of blackened death and cavernous noise and underground extreme death metal. There are some incessant crescending guitars grinding against your speakers constantly like nails on a chalkboard, flurries of dizzying percussion and demonic vocals, and harsh, static-caked atmospheric soundscapes. Looking at the music objectively, it's pretty confusing and perhaps too chaotic for its own good, but incredibly immersive and effective nonetheless. Oftentimes, a lot of the guitars can kind of blur together into one big, noisy, sludgy mess, but on the track Affune, they stick out just a little bit more, they're a little bit more pungent, they're a little bit more memorable, and they're timed perfectly with some thunderous percussion in the very introduction. And I'm especially loving the really painful, doom-soaked introduction to Manner of Speaking. I do believe that as the album comes to its close, it does grow to be a little bit stale and a little bit monotonous, as it tends to repeat and reuse a lot of the same tricks and tactics used across the record. It doesn't help either, may I add, that the album's closing number, Bode, is 13 minutes long, and it simply doesn't need to be. But again, despite that, the album can be ruinously pretty effective. It never ceases to amaze me just how convincing Portal's argument can be even after 43 minutes of cavernous, blackened death metal and noise. A compliment I can very much also give to Hagbulbia, which is a demented slab of just pure intensity and sonic trauma. This thing is fucking bonkers. Constantly layering thick, towering walls of oppressive industrial and blackened noise with incredibly menacing demonic vocals. Across this entire record, it really does feel like Portal is trying to bring some kind of multi-dimensional demon into the human world. I'm just trying to listen to some crazy tunes. These motherfuckers over here trying to summon fucking Dormammu or some shit. It is noticeably a much more one-dimensional experience in comparison to Avow, but a pretty brutal and agonizing one despite that. Like, I feel pretty comfortable saying that sonically, Hagbulbia has perhaps some of the heaviest and darkest material that Portal has ever constructed. Now, none of this is to say that these albums, separate or combined, are perfect experiences. I've already mentioned some of the issues I have with these albums separately, but it's worth noting that combined, the entirety of Avow and Hagbulbia can overall grow to be a pretty aggravating kind of experience. And frankly, not so much in the way that Portal intends. The fact is, there is simply no way to casually listen to 80 minutes of physically and mentally taxing blackened death metal and pure noise. These are records that are going to require the utmost attention, and I can't help but wonder how many of y'all will be willing to give up exactly 80 minutes for exactly that. These aren't records you're going to be playing at the family barbecue. These aren't records you're going to be adding to some kind of workout playlist. These are records you're going to listen to alone in a basement with a really, really, really strong drink. And even if you do exactly that, you may find yourself growing more and more tired with these records as they continue to repeat a lot of the same tricks and tactics, again, across 80 agonizing minutes. For this reason, and this isn't going to make any sense, but just bear with me, I'm going to give both of these albums an extremely unenthusiastic 3.5 out of 5. I will not argue that these albums are not extremely well made, because they are. The production is fantastic, the performances are fantastic, the musicianship is fantastic, and there's an element of shock factor to Hagbulbia as well that I think makes this all the more powerful and provocative. But, goddamn, 80 minutes is just too goddamn much, especially when a lot of this material over time does feel repetitive, does feel one-dimensional, does feel, dare I say, even derivative of other records we've heard in the past from Portal. Even so, I've no doubt that fans of Portal are going to go gaga over these two records, particularly if you do miss the more atmospheric, cavernous death metal of the band's early years. As far as new listeners are concerned, I think personally you'd be better off listening to Vexavoid or Ion, but if you've got 80 minutes to kill and you're still locked at home thanks to COVID, by all means, give it a fucking shot. So 3.5 out of 5. Perhaps an unenthusiastic one, depending on exactly where you stand with this band, but a 3.5 out of 5 nonetheless. Warts and all, this is a damn good project. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be. So what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.